Captain Jahil has a shipment of Taman Sashir waiting to be delivered to Largo 5. Major Kira asks for the star charts for the Argosian sector, but the Glycine sector comes up instead, and Commander Sisko has a problem with his Ractogeno. Chief O'Brien to the rescue. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. I should not give myself tongue twisters at the beginning there, but I couldn't help it.
Yeah, I'm surprised you made that. You did that.
Not really. We're doing a review of Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 4, Babel. Babel, it's both. Story by Sally Caves and Ira Stephen Bear. Teleplay by Michael McGreevy and Naren Shanker. Directed by Paul Lynch. This was January 24th, 1993. Where were you? Cirroc Lofton, how are you today?
Doing well.
Yeah, I think I got...
actually spelling, putting thou in jacket.
Excellent. Jake Sisko, everybody. Actually, let's start there. I had forgotten that you also got the virus and you were talking funny. And what I thought must have been super difficult is to deliver nonsense lines as if you're trying to convey something, as if those words mean something to you. It's like your own version of technobabble, right? And
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you remember doing that at all? Because it seems like it might be something that might stick out.
I was looking at it, trying to think if I remembered. And I was also thinking as I was watching it, were we given the actual babbling words to say, or were we allowed to make it up? It's like, because I can only imagine like the script supervisor saying, no. It's you're like, dude, it's babbling.
It's frying pan, not saucepan, dummy.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, come on, really, we're gonna stick to that on this. So I did wonder, and I almost went to look for the script, but I just knew it was going to be forever to find the script itself to see if the dialogue matched the script, if O'Brien's words, my words, if that's what was in the script. But I'm going to say yes because they pretty much think out everything on
That's
Star
what
Trek.
I would have guessed.
I'm going to say yes because plus the other actors would need a cue to know when their line would come on, right? So there has to be some lines there.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking too is that you don't want to rely on the actors' improv. That's one less thing that you want to worry about. You don't want to just say, just make something up, because that's going to make life harder for the actor too,
Right.
in a strange way, because then you're trying to come up with random words rather than acting like those words mean something to you. I feel like it would hurt the performance.
Absolutely. And so that kind of drew me to the conclusion that this was all scripted. All of these lines were scripted, that we just memorized the lines, which makes it actually more difficult to memorize random words out of order and then to say them as if they're a sentence that you're trying to say coherently, right? So for you, it makes sense. The person who's receiving it, it doesn't make sense. So that was one of the curiosities I had just watching the episode, was how it was written. Then the complexity of the language I thought was really on a high level in this episode. It's story by Sally Caves and Ira Bear, but I really felt like the teleplay, the Michael McGreevy and Naren Shankar did a fantastic job of the language. And by that, I mean the science, the medical language in this was kind of deep. We're talking about viruses and vaccines and peptide structures and this and that and all this really heavy science, medical science stuff. And also the technological science behind it.
Yeah, I was thinking we
So I
could get
thought,
some help from Dr. Mohamed Noor on some of that stuff. I was actually thinking
right.
like we need a doctor in the house. Oh, maybe our good buddy Dr. Anne Marie Segal, who is a medical doctor, will be in the free for all and can help us out a bit with that.
Yeah, so I was blown away with that. I thought it was a lot of techno babble in this one, medical techno babble.
Mm-hmm.
They could have called it techno babble. That would have been a really great episode title, since it's
You're right. That is so cool. It should be called Techno Babble.
yeah, right. I
Love
mean, it
it.
would be literally the first time that they would have acknowledged this terminology where techno is involved. Um, but I was the first thing. There's just, I thought the same thing you thought, which is being able to convey a sentence out of order in that kind of way, but still deliver it in the way where you're believing that you're saying something coherent. I thought that was pretty great. O'Brien does a great job of it, actually. I thought he was the best.
Yeah, was this the first O'Brien Must Suffer episode? I feel like we already had one in episode 2 or 3. So this kind of was already the second O'Brien Must Suffer episode out of 4. They just started the show and they're like, there's something about that
Yeah.
guy. I really want to put him through torture. Let's just screw with O'Brien for an entire series. That punk.
Yeah, it did feel like if you feel right at home though, right away from the beginning when they're like, "Hey, you got to do this, you got to do that," and I'm thinking, for a station that big, there should be more than one guy who can fix the replicators. It's just
With there are 5,000 people on that station.
right.
So come on.
Somebody else got to be able to do
Yeah.
this. He can't be the only guy doing everything.
O'Brien's like, can you call O'Malley? Geez, I'm doing all this other stuff. What about
And you know what?
O'Houlihan?
And another reference I caught, which I thought was interesting, was the the lines they had about Rom, because at this point Rom is not known as an engineer who can fix things, right?
Yep.
And I thought that was interesting that later on, because I know Rom now as the guy who can get in there and look under the hood and fix things, almost a Ferengi O'Brien type of thing. And so when they talked about him in this way in this episode, I thought, wow, they hadn't established yet that they wanted to make Rom into the kind of engineering savant that he is.
Yeah, I wonder if they kind of had an idea though, like, or if it was just a coincidence, if it was just an accident, because the fact that Quark said, "Oh, Rom was going to fix him," I was like, I did the same thing you did. I was like, wait a minute, hang on a second. Like just the fact that it was mentioned there, where it makes your ears perk up. Like, were they
Yeah.
already talking about Rom fixing things? But then Odo says, that's impossible. Rom's an idiot. And I was like, Odo, you know better than that. First of all, that's rude. Secondly, he can fix stuff, theoretically.
Yeah. Well, he
Maybe he
eventually
couldn't at
becomes a
that
guy,
point. Yeah.
maybe at that point, but it's just interesting to me how that's the exact opposite of how we eventually get to know Rom, right? We know Rom now as the guy who can fix things, who
Mm-hmm.
can break into things, who, he has the technological know-how. And initially when Quark said that the replimat was broken in the original Quark Odo scene, which I really enjoyed, because that was where Odo says, Quark says, without me around, you'd be forced to find some other poor innocent to persecute, So he framed himself as this poor innocent guy that he's
Poor
being
victim.
persecuted. Yeah,
Always the victim, this Quark guy.
always the victim. But I thought the dialogue was great in that scene. Of course, the one customer was telling Quark how to eat it, because you made it, you eat it. And Odo had Quark's back. So that was one thing I noticed. It's like, oh, okay, Odo, right off the bat, even though he gives Quark a whole lot of crap, he actually has his back in the moments that count, right? And particularly in this moment when he felt like Quark was being bullied. He didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he stood and got his back. But in that scene when Quark was complaining about the Replicant, I was thinking to myself, isn't Rom, can't Rom fix that? That's right up Rom's wheelhouse. Until later on, they made the reference about Rom. But initially, my first thought is Rom can fix that.
That's cool.
He
I didn't
knows
think
that.
that. I didn't think about that, but you're right. Yeah, that's now we've been kind of programmed to know there's a connection there. And then, of course, that was Rom's non-appearance mention. That may have been his first non-appearance mention of the series. There was also one for Keiko O'Brien, and there was also one for our good buddy Nog. Those were the good non-appearance mentions that I captured there. But when they mentioned Rom, I was kind of half hoping that we would see him. I was like, oh, good. Are we going to see Rom? Are we going to see Nog? Are we going to see? I did expect to see Keiko, because when the show opened up talking about Keiko, I thought that later on it was going to be like they go back to the O'Briens, quarters, and we're going to see him talk. But it went into a totally different direction. But yeah, at first it sounded like it was going to be in the direction of the school and Keiko and whatever. Then that was cute. I liked just those little bits, those little slices of life that they have at the beginning of every episode. Those are always kind of my favorite things to focus on, because those give you your own little story. The episode is about XYZ, but at the beginning of that episode, they tell you a little story like, this is happening at the school, or the Arboretum is doing this, or we need more people at waste extraction, or whatever. It's kind of like a non-appearance mention for a story in a way. But those are cool. I love those slice of life things. And those are things that are missing in a lot of other shows. I think Deep Space Nine does that the most and does that the best, where they just give you, the mundane, everyday life, cool stuff that for me is really interesting, and it's good for trivia too.
Yeah. They started off with that kind of everyday thing. This kind of started off with a day in the life of O'Brien, stressed out, those people stuck in the airlock, which, by the way, who wants to be stuck in an airlock, right?
That sounds terrible.
That's worse than an elevator. It's literally airlocked.
With other people's soilage. I wouldn't want to be stuck in a thing with someone.
But then the other guy comes up to him and says, hey, I've been here for a couple of days. I need you to fix my ship and this and that. So like you said about the kind of the mundane everyday, what a day in the life on a space station would be like, that's what it looks like. Brian's got somebody yelling in his ear about, something that he has to do. He's running over here. Captain's mad at him because his coffee's is too hot, and so it did have that kind of day in the life feel to it. It starts off really familiar in that kind of way. Usually, and what I'm noticing on the other Star Trek shows is it enters into this drama right away, and it's the drama. And in this particular case, it didn't really enter into drama. It was just like a chaos day, but there's no like dun dun dun. Now the aliens are here, and then
totally
roll credits, right? This ends up just kind of it rolls into the story. It's like we don't know what it's about right off the top when you watch the teaser in the beginning. You really don't know what it's about to be about. Replicators need to be fixed. I love how O'Brien says, I should have transferred to a cargo zone. No people, no complaints. And I just thought that was a cool, that's how a Starfleet officer bitches and moans. That's proper bitching and moaning. I like
we're going to take a quick break, everybody. I do want to mention that alien Strock that you were referencing, Captain White, Captain Jahil White.
Yeah.
That was him. He's great at golfing, actually. That's the twist of it all, not basketball. So, and when we come back, something really interesting. We had a celebrity guest starring in I guess they're all kind of celebrities, but a pretty interesting celebrity in the guest cast today to talk about. So that'll be really exciting. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Seventh Rule Deep Dive. It's the Deep Space Nine Deep Dive with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
All right, here it comes. I checked out the pronunciation. The top pronunciation is Babel, but for our purposes, we're going with Babel. I like the techno Babel thing. I think that's brilliant. Here are the trivioids of the week. Boy, are they fun. Captain Jaheel White has a shipment of Tommen Sashir waiting to be delivered to Largo 5. Major Kira asks for the star charts for the Argosian sector, but the Glycine sector comes up instead. Commander Sisko has a problem with his Ractigino. That was a guess, by the way. I don't think they said Ractigino, but we know he likes Ractigino. O'Brien takes his coffee black, double sweet. That should be a trivia question. Keiko is quite fond of the lad. Chief O'Brien has a case of Dathanitis. That is a Darmok reference. Next Generation episode. Deep Space Nine is under quarantine lockdown, except for Quark's bar. Dibaridium core is for man. Why do I do this to myself? I can't even, there's some serious technical. Dibaridium core for a power source has got to be Cardassian technology. Quark pretends to be sick to communicate. This virus is something Deacon Elig might have thought up. Quark plays Dabo by himself. Odo doesn't know how to gamble. And Quark served on a Ferengi freighter for 8 years. All right, that was a mouthful. So
I told you the words in this. This is the most techno babble we've had so far. When you talk about the science and also the Kira explaining the technology behind the thing that was making this biological virus inside of the Replimat, all of that stuff was very difficult to word out. I'm sure it took more time than usual.
And then on top of that, the fact that all of you guys also got real words put in nonsensical sentences. Right. You guys probably are like, okay, this is week 4, week 5 of this show. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hang. If this is what it's going to be like, this is crazy. I need a raise, man. This is crazy.
Yes. All of those difficult techno babble on top of words that don't make sense in no kind of order that you would have to memorize precisely to how the script wrote it. So, this is an O'Brien must suffer. This is pretty much everyone must suffer.
Yeah. So this interesting celebrity guest we've got here. There was a nurse that was taking care of you and the others, if you'll recall. Her name was Nurse Jabara. Nurse Jabara is played by an actress called Anne Gillespie. Now, Anne Gillespie was in some shows like Judging Amy, Gilmore Girls, Diagnosis Murder, ER, Seventh Heaven. People are like, okay, get to it. She also played Nurse Jabara in 4 Deep Space Nine episodes. So that's cool. This is the first of the 4. So look forward to seeing more of her. But she also played Kelly's mom on Beverly Hills 90210. So there for everybody out there that's like, wait a minute, isn't that Kelly's mom? Yep. That's Kelly's mom.
I remember Nurse Jabara, or the actress, the woman who played her. And people don't know this, but her first name was Kareem Abdul.
Everybody knew that. She looks so much like her dad. she, she was the spitting image of her dad. She was a little taller though.
But no, I don't remember being in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did see myself, because I actually wrote myself down as a nab when they first mentioned me, so I said, "Oh, okay, I'm a nab in this episode."
That's funny. Real quick, I do want to say, everybody, here's a piece of trivia for you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, what was his original name? The answer coming in 5 seconds while you guess. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, what was his original name? Do you know, Cirroc?
Yeah.
Nice. And that name is, correct me if I'm wrong then, Lou Alcindor. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. Yep. What a relief. I'd feel pretty dumb if I said that and you'd be like, no, Ryan, actually, that's totally wrong.
It's Lou Alcindor, yeah.
Anyway.
If I'm not mistaken, he only lost one game in college for 3 years that he was there, if I'm not mistaken. But
played for the Bucks too, I think, initially.
He did.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, this has been basketball talk, but back to the goods.
Yeah, back to Technobabble. I want to say one thing I observed about this episode was that Alexander Siddig is excellent at the medical stuff. Now, I've heard you say that LaForge, LeVar Burton as Geordi is one of the best at delivering the Technobabble when it comes to like space talk, spaceship.
He's the best I've seen,
Yeah. And I want to give Alexander Siddig his props at the medical stuff because he rips that stuff off so clean. Like he is a doctor. It's like he really is a doctor. And the way he rips it off, the connotations and the fluctuations in his voice is like he knows what he's talking about. And I know for a fact he doesn't.
you know for a fact he is not an MD.
I know for a fact he has no idea how all of that stuff that he said worked, but he said it so good and so like from a stance of authority and just of knowing that I was like, wow, you got to give this guy credit because he's just ripping off this medical stuff like he went to med school and he's just memorizing lines and he's just so good at delivering those lines. Like he knows what he's talking about. So I thought that was another thing.
And also on that subject, shout out to the people that don't usually get credit for those kind of things. The science advisors, the medical advisors that are not only advising the writers on how to do it, but they're advising the writers, the script supervisor and the actors on how to pronounce it. Because you are tying the actors' hands behind their backs if you're putting out words that are difficult to pronounce or that are made up, unless you are there coaching them on how to pronounce it so that they don't, that's one less thing they have to worry about in an episode where there's clearly a lot of things to worry about with their speech. So whomever did that, shout out to them because that obviously makes a big difference because then Sid can show off his acting chops and impress us all without mispronouncing some made-up technobabble or whatever it is. But yeah, that's a team effort.
Yeah. And I also think that I wanted to say a little bit about Babel because I don't know if everybody knows. We kind of assume things sometimes if we don't really get into it. But just as an origin of the word Babel and what it refers to for those people that don't, the word Babel is a biblical reference. It's a term that comes from the Old Testament, and it refers to the Tower of Babel that was built in ancient Babylon by a fellow by the name of Nimrod. And that's the biblical story of Babel. Now, the way it goes is they were trying to build this structure into the heavens, and God didn't want this to be done. So as punishment, God gave languages out and separated the ability for all of these people to talk in the same language so that they wouldn't be able to get together and build a structure into the heavens. And that's the narrative, the allegory behind the Tower of Babel. It's essentially the biblical way of explaining the origin of languages and how they are and why languages are different. And it also explains essentially how if people are not able to communicate with each other, then they no longer have power. And that's essentially the overall mythology behind the story. Without the ability to communicate with each other, you won't be able to get together and produce whatever it is that you're trying to produce. And so God removes that ability by making everyone speak different languages. And so they would sound to each other the same way we sounded to each other in this episode, which is foreign, right? You wouldn't understand what the person is saying, even if they were speaking a completely different language. So, and the reason I bring that up is because it is consistent with my original premise that a lot of the Deep Space Nine story is biblically based.
Totally.
And then Michael Piller and Rick Berman, specifically Michael Piller, had a lot of biblical inserts that he wanted to make sure they covered along the line of this show. And I felt like they have done that. I mean, you start with the emissary, so you already start with that frame of mind, like putting people in the space of religious iconography. And then you continue it with episode titles like this, where you have an episode titled Babel or Babel, essentially highlighting the fact that, yes, you are borrowing certain biblical storylines, mythology, and etymology. So,
yeah, I remember when you first made that connection that all three Siskos had biblical names. That was really interesting. Right. Jacob, Joseph, and Benjamin. And your sister was Jesus, I believe. No, but that's really interesting. And I do remember hearing that story about Babel. And that is it is an interesting one because that's just kind of a way of dividing people, divide and conquer, basically, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have a big question, and I'm trying to think if I want to ask it right. Okay, let's just ask it right now. Why did they just fucking write it down? like
yeah,
why
I thought
not
the same thing?
Or nod? Because I still couldn't figure out, and this will be a good question for the free-for-all, I couldn't figure out if the sick people could understand the non-sick people. We know that the non-sick people couldn't understand them. Because we did get a hint when Sisko said, when he talked over the intercom and said, to anybody that can understand me, that tells us that they can't understand him if they're sick. But there were other reactions from the sick people that seemed like they could understand them, like when the nurse was talking to Kira when she's already sick and he says something and she kind of like nods or sighs in acknowledgement. So I just couldn't figure it out. But yeah, couldn't they just write it down? I don't know.
Yeah, I was in an impression that even if you were sick and you couldn't verbally say what you wanted to say, that you could still understand what somebody else was saying. Because it felt like they were responding to cues. I mean, at some point, Sisko's telling Jake, "I'm not going to lose you. I'm going to make sure," and it seems like Jake is listening and understanding what he's saying, right? And even with O'Brien, when he's being tested in the medical, with Dr. Bashir kind of running tests on him and he's talking, if you didn't understand what they were saying, you wouldn't even know why they were taking you to the the med bay.
Right. So that's why it seemed like they could understand them. But again, when Sisko said to anybody that can understand me, I was like, oh, I guess they can't. And then, but then the
I think
question of whether they could write it down,
yeah.
maybe their brain doesn't, maybe they would be writing down the nonsensical words too if they tried to write it.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I'm sure of that. There's no way for them to um, write it down. And the reason I say that is because if I'm not mistaken, when Bashir first caught the symptoms of his Babel virus, he was looking at a computer screen that was saying something. And I believe what they were trying to convey was that it was the words he was reading were out of order and
Okay.
nonsensical.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
that
when
all
I
makes
looked,
sense.
I kind of looked at the computer screen and it didn't make any sense what was being
Then that would
displayed
all
on
be
this computer screen.
consistent, and that would all make sense to me in that regard, because they did say something like that, to where in the brain, what you are seeing here is triggering a different word. So whether you're triggering it, auditorily or verbally or written or whatever it is, you're getting a different word. But let's take another quick break in this fun deep dive. When we come back in just a second, we'll have Malissa Longo joining us, and we should pretend like we don't understand a word she's saying and just be like, tree forgot juicy fruits, and then she'll be like, I hate you guys, and leave.
but look, Ryan, it wasn't easy to do that, right?
No, it's
It's
hard
not.
because you have to think about it.
Yeah,
That's why they had to have those lines memorized, because otherwise
yeah,
you're
it's
just
not.
focusing on thinking about it.
Yeah, because you're thinking, what's the next word I'm going to say, right? Suitcase, beer, chair.
Right.
Like you
Because
have to think of the words.
humans naturally make connections. So it's counterintuitive for us to make words that aren't connected. Kind of like if a singer
Right.
uh, tries to sing out of tune, it's actually a really hard thing to do because we've practiced a long time to sing in tune. So you can't even fake singing out of tune or in a fucked up way.
It's difficult to come up. You'd have to memorize the script. It's difficult to come up on the spot with nonsensical stuff, trying to say it like you're saying something.
Exactly. Anyway,
Yeah.
mystery solved. We'll be right back with Malissa Longo on the Seventh Rule Deep Space Nine Deep Dive. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the Deep Space Nine Deep Dive with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Malissa Longo is here, feeling very dour.
Dour.
So, something that we haven't covered yet, Malissa Longo, and I know you're going to want to, is we haven't talked about Major Kira and her performance and her role in this episode and all the things that she did. We did talk a bit about the actors talking nonsense and how difficult that must be. Cirroc was talking about how there was an alien at the bar telling Quark to eat it. There are all kinds of things. But did you have any thoughts on the Major Kira storyline and the Bajorans?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. It was an interesting look at how Kira dives into things. She goes headfirst into everything. And she doesn't give up. She doesn't let up until, if she doesn't get the right answer, then she'll try another tactic. So, yeah. And I can see why some people may have had an aversion to her early on in the series, because she is pretty, she's pretty aggressive in much of the way that she approaches life in general. So, and that comes across, and I think that's wonderful that it shows where Kira starts to, and then where she, how she evolves in 7 years.
Something that we should have mentioned at the top of this episode, by the way, is that Cirroc, when we first did a review of this way back in 2019, in the end of May of 2019, I believe it was, with Aaron, you, myself, we had Armin Shimmerman as our guest. And we didn't, Malissa informs us, we didn't really actually talk much about the episode. That's why all this feels kind of like uncharted territories to us. We talked mostly about Armin and all the things he's doing. We just kind of enjoyed his company and hung out with him. And so this is kind of like our actual first review, our first deep dive into this episode. Because last time we watched it and we're like, okay, cool. So what's up, Armin?
Right. Yeah. Well, and then Armin's really good at asking questions too. So he asked a lot of questions as well. So there was a lot of back and forth, but not really much talk about the episode, if any.
And we do love Armin and thank him for being our first major guest on a Deep Space Nine review. He's been so good to us. Anyway, I didn't want to derail the conversation, but that's something I should have mentioned at the top of the episode, that we kind of never reviewed this one. So this is a new one. What a treat.
Yeah. And it felt like I hadn't talked about this episode, and I guess we didn't talk about the episode itself. One thing I was going to say about Kira and what the Bajorans did with this, because they basically come up with a biological weapon that they were going to unleash on the Cardassians, right? And when you think about the level of extreme that they were going to go through to do that, and Kira being able to hunt down Dr. Cermak, so to find a way out of this, but it's very reminiscent, and this is, you couldn't know this at this point, 5 episodes into season 1. But now, having watched the show and now reviewing this and watching this is exactly what Section 31 does to the changelings.
Right? Yeah.
They formulate a biological weapon that they're trying to take them out with. And, so it's almost... They recycle that storyline, that plot line later on, in season 6 and 7. So I think that just shows you how much that rings true to a tactic that would be taken by a group in order to gain the upper hand in the situation. So, to me, this is it holds true. It's consistent with what the writers have been delivering us throughout the show, and I thought it was just amazing too, because when we did the review, I'm pretty sure it was prior to COVID-19 coming on the world, right?
Yep.
So hearing about emergency quarantines, we probably never discussed these things.
We did not even talk about that for sure, because that was in 2019. We didn't even talk about it in this review, but that was kind of my big takeaway too. I was like, why aren't they all wearing masks? What are you doing? You guys are walking around licking doorknobs. What's going on here? Like, you got a virus that's airborne. Everybody's like, hey, what can we do? It's a thing that happens to everybody, I guess.
Well, at that point, they were probably all infected anyway. So, except for maybe Odo, who doesn't have a respiratory system. So it probably wouldn't affect him the same way.
Yeah, but just the fact that they're talking about an airborne virus, that they're talking about quarantining. As a matter of fact, at some point or another, Bashir on the image of his computer screen had an actual virus kind of looking, JPEG.
With little balls and the spiky things.
Almost looking like the official logo for COVID. So I was thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, this is too close to home. And once again, just kudos to the writers. Ira was definitely a big part of this. He wrote the story. Just to be able to, this is, like you said, January 24th, 1993. Nobody was talking about quarantining. Nobody was doing deep dives into viruses and biological weapons. It wasn't a major thing. I'm sure it was a thing. It wasn't a major thing. And it wasn't as heavy in the front of our in our face as it is now, and something that's everybody now has some relative knowledge of, having experienced this pandemic that we went through.
And a lot of people that don't have any knowledge, that doesn't stop them either. Everybody became an armchair virologist by day 2.
Yeah, right.
They're like, well, actually, bro, you don't know anything. What are you talking about? Well, no, but I heard that.
Yeah. Right.
Who did you heard it from?
That would have been so funny if they were doing that, like on the station where they're like, well, I heard if you drink red leaf tea that it makes the virus go. No, I heard that if you take a warm bath, not too hot, the virus doesn't like that.
Right.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Everybody became an expert, like you said. But I wanted to bring up, you mentioned about the Sisko, about Kira, and how she kind of goes off on her own handle, and she's like, no, I'm going to do this. And when she goes up to Sisko at the end of this, and she's like, oh no, I'm about to go see the dude.
Yeah.
She says that she's not asking for permission. Just for the record, she's not saying, Captain, can I do this? Should I do this?
She's basically leaving him a Post-it note. She's just letting him know so he doesn't worry.
Right. She's taking charge. And one thing that I noticed in the delivery of the lines, when Odo is there, because Odo's in the background when Kira comes in and she's like, oh, okay, I found the guy, about to go get him. I know where he is. And Sisko's like, trying to say, no, you can't do that. But I thought Odo gave a really great line, and he's like, better let her go, Sisko.
Mm-hmm.
She's all we've got. And he called him Sisko.
I caught the same thing, and I wanted to ask you about that. We're used to him calling him Commander.
Captain.
Or Captain
Commander,
later.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
I caught that too. I wonder what that's about. I wonder if when he changed, when that change happened, and he started calling him Commander.
Mm-hmm.
Or did he call him Sisko in this moment because essentially everybody's about to die, and this whole chain of command illusion is about to be dissolved because we're at a point where it's life or death right now for everybody, including
we're all equals here now. Yeah.
Right. So I wonder if that was the reasoning behind the non-addressing as commander. But you caught that too, though.
Definitely. It kind of jumps out at you when he goes, let her go, Sisko. You're like, hey, you watch your mouth, Odo.
Sisko,
I was thinking he's right.
But then I was thinking he's right. I'm like, what other options do you have at this point exactly? You don't really especially when it really got serious for me when O'Brien got sick and they said he had 12 hours. And when they said and then it made me think, well, then that means I only got like 24 hours, right? That's what I was thinking. So as soon as they said O'Brien's got 12 hours, I'm like, well, shit, I got it like 12 hours after O'Brien. So if he's only got 12 hours, Jake's got 24 hours. So that means, shit is really about to hit the fan, and Sisko doesn't have many options at this point, right? This is like, and the other thing I also thought of was like how all the problems have to be solved in-house. Right now, you get sick in your house, you fall down, you break your leg. You don't try to patch it up in-house, right? If it's a small cut, you'll cut it and you put some, Neosporin or whatever and band-aid it up. But something that's serious, you got to go to the hospital for. So we go to the central plate. And then even for when you get to the hospital, they're like, oh, no, this requires a specialist and you need an open heart surgery. You need an open heart surgeon. That person's over at another place. So when you seek medical attention, you literally are going around. You're at Johns Hopkins, you're here, you go to the cancer research place, you're here, you're there, you have to fly around, you have to meet people. And it made me think how in this situation at a space station in the middle of nowhere, I felt like, wow, there's nowhere else to go to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel like, oh, there's no like specialist to call. Like, oh, well, let's go call the virologist, the Dr. Fauci of the future, like I was thinking, you know what I mean? I was thinking like, I think Dr.
Fauci will still be alive in a few hundred years.
But I was thinking, where is the central command for a situation like this? right? Where you would think Bashir would have resources at his disposal, where he's able to call the Starfleet headquarters for infectious diseases and say da 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 da. This is what's happening, and they would come in maybe with a quarantine unit, and, you know. So I
That's a
just
good
thought,
point.
yeah,
They're very
thought,
standalone in that station. They're just
yes,
kind of
Yeah.
self-sustaining.
yes.
Well, maybe
Yes.
when Bashir calls Deep Space Nine frontier medicine, then this is why he is accurate in that statement, because they are on the edge of space, on the
Right.
front edge of the frontier, and they're basically on their own.
Yeah.
Speaking of on their own, we do have to take another quick break. But before we do that, we could not have done this on our own without the help of some friends called, well, all of you out there, of course, but also including Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey, the Grizzlies fan, Bill Victor Arucan,
Arucan.
Titus Mohler. I think he's a Kings fan, actually. I think I remember him posting about the Kings, Titus Mohler.
Oh, interesting.
Darlena Marie Blender, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann on a post, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Neal, Akasaka. Justine Norton-Kertson, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, my live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach-Heid, Jed Thompson, Steve Case, Joe Bugbuster, and of course,
Buster.
Dr. Susan V. Gruner, and Jason Okun.
Jason.
We should find out what flavor of Starburst they would all be, because Jason would be strawberry. He's like, I got strawberry. All right, we'll be right back,
Questions.
everybody. Stick around. We will be incorporating Mr. Aron Eisenberg into this next segment of our free-for-all, and we will see you soon. Stick around. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. This is the fun free-for-all. It's the deep dive version of the free-for-all. Malissa Longo is here, of course, wearing her family shirt. It's the Sisko family, or is it the Ferengi family?
Ferengi family.
Let me
I need
pull
to
that.
get a Sisko family one.
Yeah, you do.
For the Sisko day.
Look at those. Love it.
Nice.
Wait a second. That's a misnomer. Mai is live in New York.
Big Apple.
Not in Tokyo today. Scott Jensen is also here. The evil one, Goldu Scott Jensen. He's the least evil one ever, though, honestly. Faith Howell is here. She totally agrees. Eve England is here. She disagrees. And Jason Okun is like, leave me out of this.
I'm strawberry.
Oh, everybody at home, remember how before we stopped recording, we predicted that Jason Okun, if he were a Starburst flavor, he would obviously be strawberry. He confirmed that. It wasn't when we were recording, sadly, but he said, I'm totally strawberry, bro.
Ryan was right.
It's true.
Yep.
It actually happened. Okay, so what we're going to do is back in 2019, in May of 2019, we reviewed this episode. I say review because we hardly actually talked about this episode because we had a special guest named Armin Shimmerman who joined us. And so we mostly talked about him in general on the show. But there were a couple things to bring up, and we'll have Mr. Aron Eisenberg start off the conversation here. Malissa, you chose this clip, and I'll pull it up. And we'll watch for a second. Grab your popcorn.
In this recent episode was how you end up in ops. And it made sense that you end up in ops. And the reason that we would never see you in ops is, as you once told me, when I joined Starfleet and I was terrified I was going to be off the show, you said to me, you're going to work more because now you're part of the solution. And I didn't really quite understand that. But now, looking back, I completely understand it. And I love that. And I'm assuming that you don't really end up in ops very often in the 7 years. But when I was watching Voyager, and forgive me, Voyager fans, in the second episode, Neelix is sitting on the bridge. And I'm like, you're not part of the solution, Neelix. How are you on the bridge? Doesn't make sense to me. And
Well, that's interesting. I forgot that he threw major shade on Voyager. But Malissa, can you start us off on this? What made you pick that clip?
Well, one, because it was the only conversation about the actual episode. But two, I liked what Aron was saying about being part of the solution. And I love that in storytelling, where they find ways to make different characters part of the solution of the story. And I have to agree with him about Neelix being on the bridge, or, you never see Keiko on the bridge or in ops, because that's not where she's part of the solution. Yes, she's part of the solution in the classroom for her students, but not in ops. So I think that's a wonderful way to approach storytelling, is who's part of the solution and why does it make sense for you to be here or not be here. And Quark, it made sense for him to be in ops in this episode because he was part of the solution, begrudgingly or not begrudgingly. he kind of enjoyed it, but especially when he's beaming Odo out.
Energizing.
He had so much pleasure in that moment. But yeah, so that's why I really liked what he said in that clip, for those reasons.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. But I was enjoying somebody's bird in their background. That was really nice. Somebody had a nice bird chirping, had a lot to say. What do you guys think? What do you think about Quark being there and the dichotomy there with Neelix? Do you think Neelix did not fit on the bridge in those early episodes? Oh, Eve doesn't know. She doesn't. She's never seen Voyager, right?
Yeah.
No, I do kind of agree.
We have no idea.
He wasn't my favorite.
I love Neelix, but I always felt like he was a little weird and out of place on the bridge too.
Yeah.
But
Even in the very beginning.
I really liked Quark in ops though, and somehow it's like it proved that Quark was part of us. He's on our side. Mm-hmm. When it comes down to it, he's going to play for our team and help us out. So this to me started the love affair with Quark and how he's like the hero of the whole show, of the station anyway. So
he always struck me as like the older brother who doesn't want to play with the younger siblings, the younger brother's kids, friends and so forth. So he knew much more than he let on. Whereas Neelix, he brought to Voyager his own spaceship knowledge, but he wasn't really part of it. He didn't know the crew, he didn't know humans and whatever else. But Quark always seemed to have the advantage on everybody. So him jumping in and helping out made a lot of sense, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Well,
plus, because I thought he would have been infected, but maybe it's his biology. They didn't really explain.
Yeah, he did
strong
say
immune
that.
system.
He did say that Ferengis have a strong immune system, so
Okay.
that's why he wasn't as affected.
So then
But
that
not-
means Rom and Nog too would be good.
Right.
Rom and Noodle.
Wow.
I just got that one. That was terrible.
It's a slow burn.
Oh my gosh.
Oh god.
I think that one gave me
Noodle.
indigestion just saying that stupid thing.
These slow heartburn. Oh, man.
Well, let's right this ship. So, Malissa, can you tell us what Aron's observation was that you remember him saying? You don't remember where he was or any of the details of that. It wasn't during the recording, but can you tell us his thoughts on this episode.
Yeah, no, I think if I remember correctly, it was an interesting episode. He just had a bit of a nitpick with Kira kidnapping the Bajoran medical guy, and then her not having any consequences that followed that. He did, when they were in the runabout, say, not Aaron, but the character, said that he would see Kira in jail, basically, and Kira was like, "That's fine, but we're trying to save lives here." So yeah, and I can see where Aaron was coming from. There's no consequences for her, but it also was a desperate situation.
It was really interesting, moral thing, wasn't it? I guess because she didn't know he could fix it, so she was basically giving him a death sentence.
This is
on
true.
the hope that he might be able to help. So yeah, I thought that was quite dark, but I thought that was a really interesting thing to throw in when they were in that situation.
It's certainly something that perhaps at that time no other Star Trek show could get away with. I mean, can you see that happening in the Next Generation? I mean, it's certainly, the story itself, if you look at the story, maybe that's something they could have pulled off in terms of the virus and everything else. So there's nothing unusual about that. That part of a resolution is certainly not something that would be, I mean, you can't see any character or any Starfleet character doing something like that.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that is terrible. I didn't even notice that it, not only that she gave the guy a death sentence, we get that, but yeah, what if he actually couldn't help? What if he was like, "No, I was being serious. I don't know." And she's like, "Oh, whatever. I'm gonna die anyway. What do I care?" Like, that's it.
You wouldn't be able to tell on her if he was dead too. So
yeah.
Well, this is true.
There you go.
But she would be dead too, so
yeah, so nobody gets in trouble. Kira makes decisions like that. She's been making decisions like that since she could walk, so I don't think that was anything for her.
I mean, it did seem character.
I think they could have gone more into her laying a guilt trip on this Dr. Cermak and what the other guy did as far as planting this device, this biological weapon. It could have been more pressure that she puts on him by saying he was going to be found responsible for killing all of these people because they planted that device. And there could have been some interplay there where she has to face some of the consequences of her own extreme actions that she would take, is the same as the Bajoran rebels taking an extreme action in this case. And she would have to face some of the reality that those extreme actions have unintended consequences, much like the DS9 crew being killed by this kind of a device. So there would be have a reflection there on what measure is appropriate in order to exact retaliation or revenge against, the Cardassians or whatnot. So I think there could have been some more introspect. And her having to confront a fellow, rebel and put them on the spot, like, these are my friends and you're going to be responsible. That blood's on your hand. Make him kind of volunteer as opposed to kidnap.
Something we forgot. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score. Unless you remember it from
no. Yeah, no.
No guessing.
Time has no meaning after 2019.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this was like a 7.2, 7.2, 7.2.
Somewhere between 7.2
Dikembe Mutombo's height. What'd you say, Mai?
Somewhere between 7.2 and 7.2.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
In my house.
You know him. That's right. That's Dikembe.
Yeah.
So
anybody
cute.
else? It is a 7.0. Very close. Very close. Now, somebody was credited with story by. There are a couple people, one of whom was Sally Caves. Here's a bit of trivia for you. She's credited with a story by for 2 Star Trek episodes. This is one. Which character is she credited as creating? She created a well-known Star Trek character.
Guess. Can I have a guess?
Yeah.
First, the clue. Is it an alien character?
No.
So a human character.
Was that a clue?
Jake Sisko?
No.
No.
No. Was that a clue?
No.
Okay,
No.
so a human character.
It reminded me of Picard. So
I'll give you a hint. This character was in, a good amount of episodes and at least one movie.
Eddington. No.
Barkley.
Yep.
Wow.
Broccoli. Reginald Barkley. So the other episode that she's credited in writing is what's the episode? Hollow Pursuits, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Let me see.
Hollow Pursuits.
Yeah, Hollow Pursuits in 1990. And she created the character of Barkley. Anyway, very interesting little tidbit. I believe our friend Anne-Marie Segal sent that one in as we were researching Sally Caves. So hopefully we could get Sally Caves next year when we are doing that Next Generation episode. That would be really cool. All right. Well, let's take a break, and we will come back to talk about all of the things that we hadn't noticed before until this viewing. We'll be right back on the 7th rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time to talk about the things that we hadn't noticed before in the first 17 times we watched this episode, especially Faith. There's no way Faith has not seen this, at least 15. And whatever we've noticed this 18th time. Faith, what do you got for us? Anything new?
For the record, I have seen this once for every light year from here to the Gamma Quadrant and back, probably. So we're good. This is my favorite season 1 episode. And I seeing it over and over and over again. I have to say it changed when the pandemic hit, because this episode suddenly felt like prophecy. Like, oh my God, this is happening. How did they know that people were going to act like this? How did they know that Jahiel was going to act like all these anti-maskers running around that just refused to participate in getting us all through this? And so this one just blows my mind, like a few later do. But I liked, like we said in the last segment, how Quark, stepped up and saved the day, sort of, and kind of joined the team on the side of good. And I also really just liked his pants. Has anybody else noticed? So I like thinking about the Ferengi.
Well, wait, hang on. Before you get to that, you started to ask, did anybody else notice? So did anybody else notice his pants? No.
So they're basically like hemmed tight against his leg with like a fin on the outside. And the Ferenginar is supposed to be like torrential rains of different kinds all the time. And so you imagine there would be flooding. And I wonder if like fish is a motif in their culture a lot. And I wish we could have dug into that more. But I notice little things like that when I'm looking at costuming. And I just really, that was an interesting choice and I like it. So kudos to the costumers. Again, I know we talk about Jake's outfits a lot, but they did some interesting things across the board that weren't, mini skirts.
So his pants had fins.
Yeah. Go back and look. They're cool.
Yeah, I just tried to Google it,
Look
but
at
it
that.
didn't come up. That is interesting. You know what they should have, though? They should have like those pants that you could like unbutton and they turn into shorts, since you were saying with all the flooding and stuff like that. It's all the rage in Wales.
Sort of chitty chitty bang bang pants.
Speaking of which, I don't know how to segue into that, but Scott, what's up with you?
No
did you notice anything new, costume or otherwise?
Oh, well, do you think that the whole always raining on Frankenar and the fishmans and everything might have something to do with their immune system being so strong, because all that moisture all the time and all that that other stuff kind of writes itself right there. What I noticed this time was how much I related so hard to both Quark and Miles, particularly Miles in the beginning. I had a fun last couple of weeks because of the way he's bouncing around in this episode. And everybody's like, O'Brien, fix this, fix that. I was like, man, I feel like that at work. And then then I had another moment when Ben gets mad at him. And I was like, well, wait a second, Scott, you're kind of being a hypocrite, because my AC was broken for the last 2 weeks in South Carolina, and it has sucked in here. It has been so hot for days and days and days on end. And I was acting like, Sisko in that last scene where I was like just hollering at people as they were walking by, sure is hot in here, and just stuff along those lines. But I really, really love, like everybody's been talking about Quark, but he's such a standout in this, is that I feel like this was the first full-on episode where this is the Quark that we will know for forever and ever. I love the lines of when he's in there trying so hard to talk to these people on these bio beds about remembering to pay their tab, because they're all about to die. I gotta get their money out of them before they're dead. And and his interactions with Odo were on fire, all the way down to my favorite line of the episode where he goes, we need to talk about my hazard pay. He just was like, well, what about my hazard pay? And that's the wrap up there after he gets him beamed back and essentially saves the day. And yeah, man, Quark all day long. I like to think that somehow that fictional character has inspired me to be the salesperson that I have been in the last 20 plus years. So I would like to thank our Stephen Bear, Armin Shimmerman, and the fictional Quark for paying my rent for the last 20 something years.
Hey, by the way, another idea that actually came to fruition after the pandemic, which is the idea of hazard pay. Like, that actually came about. People who were essential workers, they ended up getting a back hazard pay for their contributions during that time. So, I mean, it's actually, these guys are good. These writers, just nailing stuff like that.
I think Quark actually says that when Odo comes and says, "Why is the bar open?" Because I'm essential station business.
Yes, I'm essential.
Another thing, which we kept groceries open in other places as essential to life, essentially.
But these guys have replicators.
It's not the same as real Saurian brandy.
Yeah,
real.
I mean, hey, I'm on Quark's side on this, but it's a tough sell when they actually have like everything they could ever want just by asking for it. But he could also make the argument, sorry, Sisko made me morale officer. And unless he says differently, we can't understand him. Leader. All right, well, then I'm morale officer still.
He's the community leader.
He's the community leader.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Neelix was the morale officer.
You're right.
I'm getting my nerds mixed up. Well, Mai is live in New York, and she is our morale officer. That's for damn sure. Did you notice anything this time that you hadn't noticed before?
Just following on what Scott was saying a minute ago, I think the whole Quark Odo interaction at the end was, I think, the first chance we saw them really showing us as the audience that they were going to be that they were friends, that they were tight, that they meant more to each other than they were willing to let on. When Odo asks him if he knows how to do what he's doing, and Quark's I've witnessed the procedure, and Odo's freaking out, and then Quark's like, hey, energizing. But then after that, when Odo's pulled the guy out from the airlock, and Quark is really concerned, he's, Odo, you still with us? I thought it was really telling that they were telling us this is when this is a pair of guys who are apparently at odds but really care for each other. That was kind of neat. And then the other thing, I just wanted them to change one small piece of the script when Kira's in the runabout with that doctor she's kidnapped. She said, why don't you help yourself? And he's like, what do you mean? I just wanted her to put her left hand right behind his neck, grab his chin and go, and really give him the virus. But that didn't happen.
No.
My, you deviant.
Oh my.
Give him a good dose of virus. You know what the heck?
That's a way to get a virus right there. That's for sure.
Yeah, have some virus, doctor.
I mean, if I was going to get one, Kira kissing me and me getting a virus, I
don't think it's just a virus you'd be getting there, but that's a different story.
Wow.
Oh, come on.
Well, Eve, your thoughts?
Said I thought she might kiss him because they did set it up a bit like that. So I
pretty close.
Not that I didn't want it to happen, but I thought they're not going to go there surely. But yeah, I mean, to me, I just love that cold open with O'Brien. I just thought, here we go. This is setting up the whole O'Brien must suffer. We just thought this poor guy is just being harassed left, right, and center from everyone. And like Scott said, I think we've all been in situations where you could see that exasperation on his face, or where he just rolls his eyes after being very polite to someone. So I think he is very much the everyman. So I did particularly like that. And what I was frustrated with, and I think it goes on to that point we were talking about earlier about, how Kira was with the doctor, it almost felt a bit rushed, the ending. So I thought the pacing at the start was really cool, and that sort of sense of, that you had that ominous kind of sensation right the way through as O'Brien was going through his day. But then I felt at the end sort of resolved itself almost too quickly. And you have, the traditional, we've got, 20 seconds to go to get the bomb diffused. And I just thought actually it could have benefited from a bit more of that, deliberation of what the ethics are of what's going on and how they're actually going to solve it, and have a bit more of that. Because I think it lost a little bit by the way that it was a bit rushed and resolved ever so quickly right at the end. But the O'Brien bit stuck out for me. I just thought they must have sort of thought, he just plays this, poor soul so well that they just wanted to torture him for the rest of the 7 seasons. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, actually. I'm surprised how good these season 1 episodes. This is probably only the 3rd time I've seen them, so it's still, can't really remember all of them, but it's been pleasantly surprising how good they are at this early stage, and how you get all that characterization so early on. So it's been really cool going back to them.
I thought you were going to say compared to something, but Jason Okun thinks they're all equally good, I bet. Did you notice anything new this time that you had? This is a tough question for you, because you seem to have noticed and caught everything in every episode ever. But did you catch anything new this time?
Well, I mean, other than, certainly, the relationship with the pandemic, something that I don't think any one of us could have appreciated before that. And, I wish the solution to the pandemic was just as quick as in the episode, just swoop over a lab, grab a scientist and get it done. I'll give you 2 things that kind of stuck out at me a little bit this time around. One positive, maybe one not so positive. On the positive side, it was nice to see that every character had a moment. Everybody had a role to play in the story. I mean, Cirroc, maybe you haven't gotten as much as everybody else did, but I think, generally speaking, you look at every character, they're behaving the way they're supposed to. They get their moment. It's not like, it's an O'Brien episode and, somebody comes in for just to be on screen for a second, for one scene. Everybody gets to be there, gets to play a role. And because we're talking about multiple characters doing something, which is, certainly great to see, and maybe unusual for, early season episodes. And that's, I think to some degree separates, Deep Space Nine from, other Trek of the 80s and the 90s that took quite a bit to sort of get going. So that's certainly a positive. One thing that was kind of cringe-inducing for me this time around, and maybe I just glossed over it before, was a scene. It's a walk and talk scene with Dax and Kira, when Dax talks about being a female and people looking at her. I mean, that was just a little bit, with sort of our current sort of view of the world. This is a little cringe-inducing. At least it was for me to kind of see that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. I noticed that as well. And then she afterwards says, "Oh, I kind of like it." I was like, well, maybe for now. Maybe initially. But that does actually also bring up another thing, which was Sisko calling Dax old man. Well, first of all, look, we had 3 non-appearance mentions. Did you guys catch them all?
Yeah.
Okay. Rom and Nog and Keiko. But then when Sisko calls Jadzia old man, are we going to now start counting that as a non-appearance? Okay. Whoa.
Homer's
No, that's a nickname. That's not a reference to Curzon directly. It's a nickname.
But it is a reference to Curzon.
But through her, he's calling it to her, and he means her. He doesn't mean Curzon.
Calls Ezri that too. So
I also would say that it is an appearance, because even though Curzon is not there, Curzon is there. So it's an appearance through Dax.
So does that mean that none of her previous hosts, if mentioned, count as non-appearance mentions?
No, because if you're talking about Curzon and Curzon is not in the episode,
Homer's going to be pissed
like
that
one
he missed
episode
this
technically.
one.
So when you mention Curzon after the episode where we saw him on the bio bed, it would be a Nam after that. Because we saw him at one point, but we never saw like Neela and all the other.
So then
we
it's
see versions
then
of them.
Mentioning Curzon is a non-appearance mention, but mentioning old man is not a non-appearance mention.
Because it's more of a reference
to nickname,
to
isn't
Dax.
it?
It's a nickname. It's a pet name, platonic, but still pet name.
What do you think, Jason?
I tend to agree with that, actually. I think it's just more of a name that's stuck rather than a Nam. I think, once you refer to the I guess the person and the character, that you can consider that to be. I mean, obviously it's all random, but at least in my mind that fits better.
It's complicated.
Well, everybody at home watching this is a furious debate right now, and you need to join in on this. Is it a non-appearance mention when somebody mentions Curzon, for example, because we've seen Curzon? And secondarily, is it a non-appearance mention when Sisko says old man? Don't watch Eve. She's trying to give you the answers.
I'm about to text Homer real quick, see what he thinks.
Yeah, well, I honestly thought you guys, most of you were going to say yes, and that if Homer were here, he'd be the one being like, but
I always defer to Homer on these things.
Right, but he's not here. He's missing out.
I feel he'd agree on this occasion.
Yeah. So the other question is, and it's in reference to Odo and Quark. Odo says something like, if the bar were gone, it would make my job a lot easier, right? And my question is, fly Teletubby over easy bathtub coriander. So, okay, that didn't work. Okay, that was like in the episode they were saying nonsense. Okay, no, the question really is, do we really think that Odo wants his job to be easier? Because when he said he would want the bar gone, it would make his job easier, I was like, that doesn't seem to fit his character. I feel like Odo kind of enjoys his job and enjoys the challenge and would kind of feel a little less fulfilled if there were no bar and no Quark to come after. Am I wrong?
Oh, definitely. He just loves winding up Quark, so that's what all that was about in my how I read that. He's just doing it to wind him up because he thinks that's funny, but he loves it. Yeah. We're frenemies. Yeah.
Because isn't his job now way easier than it was when the Cardassians were in control of that station? Listening.
Oh, I don't know. He talks about how they had such strict rules and how it was kind of all the rules that Cardassians have made it a little bit easier for him because he knew that everybody was just guilty all the time. So
It's true.
he would be miserable if there was no crime. He would be miserable. He'd be floating around that bucket 24, 28/7, floating 26/7, floating in that bucket. Being sad, out there trying to trick Noggin to play more pranks just so he'd have something to do.
You know, there's a scene in one of the episodes, probably season 6 or even 7, when Otis is with Kira and he says something kind of pessimistic or something like that, and Kira goes, do you have to say something like this? And he says, well, it's expected of me. So everybody expects him to behave that way, and it's a facade, basically. He's fulfilling other people's expectations of what he's supposed to be like.
That's sweet.
Did anybody else? Oh,
no, go.
Did anybody else get like sexual connotations when Quark said, "Can I interest you in a nice double whipped Idanian spice pudding?"
Oh,
the way he said it.
Oh, yeah.
Did it sound like an invitation to some kind of extra stuff?
The fact that he didn't rub his lobes was a surprise.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a little bit like Joey though. Chicken noodle soup, he's just
yeah, double whipped. I'm like, double whipped.
No,
I just added the Idanian spice pudding to our list, Cirroc. Thank you for telling us that one. What were you saying, Mai?
So you've got in the infirmary, or with the temporary infirmary, you've got Sisko coming down and comforting Jake, giving him a hug, showing the emotion of "I care for you," and then you can see Jake visibly comforted and relaxed. And I thought, okay, that's cool. So if these guys are all military, basically, in this situation that they're in, why wouldn't they have something akin to what any military person operating in a situation where they want to sneak up on people have, i.e. hand signals to tell them, like, instead of having to leave ops entirely, why doesn't he just say, give them a signal for, we're gonna go, or you three go there, I'm gonna go there, let's turn right, let's turn left. It seems like there should have been more nonverbal skills on the behalf of the military people to communicate things in a panic situation such as this. And I thought that maybe that was a little lacking, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
We didn't have.
Was this? I don't remember this scene. What scene was this?
Well, when Jake's in there sitting on the thing, and Sisko's really worried about him, and Sisko can still talk. He comes down, and Jake's whatever he was, oregano, rosemary, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, and Sisko gives him a hug, comforts him, sits him on the bed. He says, "You'll be fine. We're taking care of it," or something akin to that. And you can see these visibly comforted.
Yeah, well, I think it's just because they can't communicate, like the words mean something completely different to them. Right. So even if they're thinking you two go that way, and that's the signal for that, it's functioning in their mind as something totally different.
There's no way to know that they would receive it as that. That's what this means.
Because we were talking about, my question was similar to that. I'm like, why don't they just gonna write it down? Like if it's that.
Well, but Ryan did that.
They had the word
on the pad. On the pad, he tried to write down what he was meaning, and it was all gibberish.
Okay, so they
on
do
the
explain
pad as well.
Yeah, they showed it with Bashir in the medical when he was doing that test. You could see the screen was English to start with, and then when he looked at it again, it was talking about sort of honeymoon and all sorts of random
things. These words just completely register as a different word in every way.
Mm-hmm. So that's why you go to nonverbal, like with ASL. It's not words; it's their gestures, which represent feelings and other things. And I thought that would have been maybe a little bit better way to do it. But
who's to say that wouldn't register differently as well?
Well, here's another thought on that, and people please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm talking out of my airlock here. But I believe that when studies were made, one side of your brain is more for movement and one side of your brain is more in communication. So the theory was that those of us who communicate verbally, we use one side of the brain, and those that use ASL use the hand motion side of the brain. But as it turns out, they actually use the same side of the brain as we do. They use the side of the brain that is for communication rather than physical movement. So even still with signs, it registers as communication. Now, please, everybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading that a long time ago. So the science may have changed since then, as it does. But that's an interesting thought as well. I don't know if the Star Trek Deep Space Nine writers room was going that deep into it. They're like, no, you guys, that doesn't work because.
Now, what about if someone saw a stop sign or something along those lines per se, and you can't read the word on it, but you know that octagon that's red means stop.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you had the
symbols
Homer meme where Homer is Captain Shaw, you know that means no right away. This is something like it could a shape or something that is immediately connected to a word or an action. Could that be something that could be deciphered? And how do the universal translators translate written words? How do they do that?
Yeah, but an action would, because they pointed at O'Brien to let them know that he wasn't doing well. So there was, I don't know. They were doing that.
Well, I mean, I travel to places where I don't speak the language all the time, but I can figure out where the bathroom is. I'm trying to eat something. There's certain basic communication that you can get done, even if you don't speak any language, any language verbally. You can still, whatever language you scream in when you burn your hand, the person will know that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't need a word. I don't need a. There's certain things that happen without the actual words involved, and so I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. Like, I think Jake comes up to the doctor at some point when O'Brien is going through his fever, and I felt like I was doing one of these or something.
Yeah, sore triceps, I think it was.
But really working out too hard. But no, I guess I was trying to use this as a communication of sickness, like he's sick, right? Fever, I don't know, something to that effect. But so that was the only little sign I saw of trying to communicate with body language.
Jason, you had something?
I mean, if you actually had some sort of even rudimentary communication, it wouldn't be Babel anymore.
Ooh,
I mean, the whole idea of Babel and the name of the episode itself is that there's a lack of communication, period.
Which brings up the question: is God a virus?
Melissa liked that question.
God made this unified group of people unable to communicate with one another and disperse them throughout the lands. And if the Bajorans made this virus to disperse the Cardassians who had taken over their land, not being disrespectful, at least not that intentionally.
I don't know. I don't know if that was the point, but I do know that they are borrowing from biblical stories, and they're making it pretty obvious with this one that's where the show is, getting a lot of its creative license from. And I think that's one of the things that makes the show good, is that they're borrowing themes, they're borrowing metaphors and concepts that we're familiar with, and putting it in a different time way into the future. And it kind of plays well when you get to see it play out of its context of historical past that it's outside of our visual. We have to kind of imagine a lot of that. At least in this realm, we get to see it kind of play out in these themes and in these scenarios. I really think that there needs to be a T-shirt with Quark's lines: Dabo drinks and money, mine give.
Give me money. I thought you were going to say there needs to be a shirt that
t-shirt.
says "Is God a virus?" I thought that's what you're going to say.
No. I want to see Dabo, drinks, hand, money, mine, give. I think that's one of my favorite favorite lines.
Take it to the next. Is the UN actually an attempt to regain that unity without the pride and the arrogance that God judged the people to have suffered from back then? So thousands of years later, we've learned how to come together, and is the UN actually an attempt to reverse that? Have we grown as a people? Are we being judged as now worthy of communicating with each other and working together for the good of all? It's just interesting. That I like the way they tie religious stuff in with the stories of these people. It's really fascinating.
Well, you can't spell unity without, you guessed it, UN. Well, I guess that's about all the time we have, everybody. But you let us know what you think about the UN, God, viruses, all those things. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. We want to thank you all for joining us. We want to thank Faith, Galdu Scott, Mai, Jason, and Eve for playing with us. For myself, Mr. Aron Eisenberg, Malissa Longo, and the Cirroc Lofton, thank you all for joining us. We will see you next time. Until then, always remember the 7th rule.